Back here on this Saturday morning, Steve Kashul, Dr. Brian Cole at his Sports Medicine Weekly, Chicago's premier sports medicine program, coming your way each and every Saturday between 8 and 9 a.m. only on 670 The Score. Our website is sportsmedicineweekly.com. Dr. Cole, we often talk about orthopedic injuries, but there's also some medical conditions that you have to face, right? Both as an orthopedic surgeon, I imagine, and also as your role as head team physician with the Chicago Bulls and also with the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, we've had a number of instances. For example, people who have diabetes, they have maybe congenital high blood pressure, they have heart conditions, they have inflammatory conditions like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or liver problems and things like that. And I'm going to be honest, Steve, those are some of the most difficult things to manage because you have to take an athlete who has to function at the highest level, make them feel at his or her best, and then find at the same time and monitor the proper medical regimen to get them there. So the challenges and the cycle of ups and downs and waxing and waning and how they feel can be a real challenge. And frankly, as a team physician, an orthopedic problem is much easier to manage because there's a beginning and there's an end point. This is one of those things that requires ongoing attention to get to make the athlete feel well, keep them safe, keep them healthy, and then get them to reach their performance goals for themselves or for the organization they're with. So it's a particularly fascinating area for me, to be quite honest, because you have to know the science. You have to be really sensitive and patient and figure it out and collaborate with a number of specialists often to get it right.
We've got a great example of a medical condition with a high-performance athlete, a young woman named Spencer O'Brien, a professional snowboarder from Canada. And she's a defending Winter Dew Tour champion, a 6-time X Games medalist, Olympian, a 5-year veteran of the Canadian national team. She first learned to snowboard at the age of 11, turned pro just 5 years later at the age of 16. And in 2013, at the age of 25, Spencer was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis just 2 months before the Sochi Winter Olympics, a genetic condition that plagued her for over a year leading up to her diagnosis. So, Spencer, thanks so much for joining us here on Sports Medicine Weekly. Quite a story. Let's ask, can you take us back to how you first learned you had rheumatoid arthritis?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. As you said, I was diagnosed at age 25, and that was, just 2 months shy of the Sochi Olympics. So I had completed that qualification year just riddled with injury. Looking back, they were all very specific joint injuries, and a lot of them kind of were unexplained. And my doctors kind of just chalked it up a lot to old injuries that weren't rehabbed properly and just the nature of my sport. I do a very high-impact sport that's really hard on your body. It basically was a lot of months of me being in a lot of pain and not really knowing why.
Spencer, did it start in your face? Like, the thing about rheumatoid arthritis is it has a really interesting but somewhat, it can have a predictable presentation. And when I've seen it in athletes, it often starts out before you get any joint problems. You're fatigued. You just feel awful. And you can't figure out why. No matter what you do, you get tons of sleep, you eat well, but you don't feel well. And then it starts to involve the small joints. Did you have a atypical or uncommon presentation of it?
I think I definitely have experienced fatigue for a long time, and I actually didn't even know that was a symptom until recently.
Interesting.
When someone told me that, I was like, oh, wow, that explains so much as to why I'm so tired all the time. Looking back, I think I definitely did have a lot of fatigue issues because I do get a lot of sleep, and I'm an elite athlete, so I focus on my nutrition, and I train, and I take a lot of effort to, be the best at what I do. But it definitely started out, really small, niggly things. Like my knees would hurt before, like while I was warming up for a workout.
Would they swell? Would they swell at the time?
They wouldn't swell very visibly at all, but they would just feel like very full and really stiff. So if I was going through squats or lunges, like they would just feel like there wasn't a lot of range there. And I would kind of push through. And I just kind of chalked it up to getting older, to be honest. I'm 30 now in an action sport, which is a lot, like much on the older scale of things. And even at 25, I that's not considered young in my sport. So I kind of just chalked it up to about 12 years doing a really high impact sport.
Visiting with Spencer O'Brien. Spencer is the defending Dew Tour champion, a professional snowboarder from Canada. And interesting topic, the challenges athletes face with rheumatoid arthritis. And also, Spencer, from what I read on your bio, severe anemia, correct?
Yeah. Right after the RA was diagnosed, we obviously ran a bunch more thorough blood tests once I received that diagnosis, and they discovered that I was also severely anemic.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry, forgive me. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah, so how long did you, in your mind, say, I don't feel well and went undiagnosed? Like, how long did it take before you were 25, but how many years were you, or months, were you suffering with just, I'm not right?
I think looking back, it was at least a year, probably about a year and a half.
Okay.
That I was feeling symptoms and just kind of pushing through and thinking that it was normal pain.
Yeah.
And then 7 months where I was really concerned, and I felt like there was something wrong with me.
And what I imagine it was a blood test. Someone finally had the wherewithal to order the proper inflammatory panel, and it showed up. Is that how you finally got diagnosed?
Well, actually, after I think maybe probably 5 months before the Olympics, around there, maybe 4 months, I went to my doctor and I was like, I'm getting all these random joint injuries, and I don't feel well. Like, I think there's something wrong with me. I kind of knew in my gut that there was something up, and he agreed with me that it wasn't really normal. All of these injuries that were quite unexplained, and he ran a bunch of tests, and my inflammation levels actually weren't alarming.
Yeah.
So they didn't diagnose it at that time, and I don't have the genetic marker in my blood.
Got it. So you're rheumatoid factor negative.
Yeah. So
okay.
So it made it much more difficult to diagnose.
Right. Yeah. So here's I'll share a brief story. When I was a resident, I trained at a place called the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, and we used to have this clinic every Wednesday that the residents would run, and it was the CAP clinic. It was the rheumatoid arthritis clinic. And we were operating on patients with rheumatoid arthritis 20 years ago on a regular basis. They were having cervical spine, hand and wrist, knee. I mean, it was like an epidemic. And this is the only disease that I can think of in my sort of contemporary training that has been successfully managed with medication. The amount of times I operate on maybe one a year, or maybe be at a shoulder replacement for someone who's just had it long enough, and occasionally some knee issues because of being on steroids and things like that. But it is the one condition that can be managed successfully with medication. So just bring us through briefly what you went through to get on the proper medical regimen, and what it was like if and when it became successful. You say, oh my goodness, I really figured it out. I feel good. What was that like?
Yeah, of course, when I found out, I was devastated. I was, 2 months away from the Olympics. I hadn't snowboarded in 7 months. I was shocked. I was heartbroken. But at the same time, having a diagnosis was relieving to know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I do remember the morning I woke up after my medication had finally kicked in, and I woke up without pain. And it was the first night in probably 6 months that I had actually slept through the night. And yeah, it was like the whole world lifted off of me. It was amazing. I really didn't understand how much pain I had been in until that moment. But unfortunately, about 2 weeks after I began that medication, it stopped working, and I had just returned to snow. I was back in Colorado at altitude, and for whatever reason, I just woke up one morning and all my symptoms came back. So my doctors then put me on a very heavy steroid going into the Olympics, just so I could get through the games. And when those were finished, they took me off of that, and I began the process of kind of going through the different meds, trying to find the one that worked best for me. I ended up going through about 4 or 5 total before I ended up on the one I'm on now, and that's been managing my symptoms extremely well for the past 3 years.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned you went 7 months and you were 2 months away. Were you unable to train and you're 2 months away from the Olympics?
Yeah, I hadn't snowboarded. I went down to Australia I had a Baker's cyst in my knee, but I didn't do anything to my knee. So they were super confused by that.
Yeah.
And I had actually been on a pretty high anti-inflammatory for my knee. So I actually went down to Australia to ride to test that out.
Got it.
And then I ended up getting capsulitis in my toes.
Oh,
so that was kind of like the final joint injury where I was like, okay, this is weird. Like, what is up? I've had bursitis in both my shoulders. I've had a ganglion cyst. I've had a Baker's cyst. And now I have capsulitis. There has to be something up.
Yeah.
And so I went down there, but I couldn't really snowboard. The pain was just too much. And it was kind of once I came back from that trip that things actually got really bad. And that was when we finally figured out what was going on.
Again, we're visiting with Spencer O'Brien, a professional snowboarder from Canada. I'm Steve Kashul with Dr. Brian Cole at Sports Medicine Weekly. Very interesting story of a young woman who is a Olympic snowboarder and suffering from rheumatoid arthritis and also severe anemia. So my question as a follow-up, and almost to wrap it up, Spencer, we really appreciate you joining us here and telling your story, is how are you now, and do you have the medicines that are necessary to take this condition under control?
Yeah, I'm great now. I feel very, very lucky to have had incredible physicians who have helped me find the drug that works well for me and my symptoms. I know that so many people with this disease struggle with that, probably, for years and years, to find something that really works for them and manages their symptoms so they can live a normal life. And I just feel so grateful to be able to do what I love every day. I don't take that for granted ever, to be able to snowboard still and to be able to move my body and train the way I want to. And yeah, I feel really lucky that I'm on medication that really handles things and allows me to be the athlete that I know I can be.
Yeah. So, the great thing is now that your amazing success story, it's hugely inspirational, and I'm sure you've had a tremendous impact on dozens of other athletes. This is a rare problem, but my guess is you have a whole circle of people that you now have around you that rally together because you need to lead by example. And I have to imagine you are just a tremendous positive impact on other athletes of any level now that you've sort of mastered how to manage this problem. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I was really nervous to speak out about it. I didn't really want to be defined by an illness.
Sure.
But doing so has been one of the most empowering things of my career. I mean, the people that I've met and the stories I've heard, there's just so much courage in the community of people that suffer from this. And I feel really lucky to be able to give those people hope. And I hope that they can find the relief that I found and be able to do the things that they want to do.
All right, I want to wrap it up with a takeaway from both of you. And Dr. Cole, we'll start with you about symptoms. All right, about when what should our listeners be thinking about when they think, oh, maybe it's mono, maybe I'm just sore and tired.
Sure.
When does this go to wow? Could it be RA, rheumatoid arthritis?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of these vague conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome. People can have occult Lyme disease. You can have mono. You can have the rheumatoid arthritis, and lab tests don't always come back positive. And what Spencer alluded to is that she had this intuition that she wasn't right, and she finally said, "This just can't be right. These are not injuries. There's something going on." So I would say that if you have these really sort of atypical, progressive symptoms, it starts out with something kind of small, and then it just continues to escalate over time, and nobody's giving you answers because it's not on the radar. You start thinking that you got to start looking for zebras, and you don't want to be tested to death and get all these lab tests that are unnecessary and scans and things of that nature. But every once in a while, zebras become relevant, and you need to be in a good medical system to figure it out. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions as a patient. And
Spencer, a follow-up from you. Do you agree? What did you learn from this about, I'm getting the proper rest. I think I'm eating good, but there's still something there. You said it was in your gut, right?
Yeah, I think learning to trust that intuition was huge. And I think for me, kind of abandoning that athlete mentality a little bit of like just put up with it and push and push and push and push. Sometimes that isn't the answer. And I think that's a big reason why I didn't get diagnosed for so long, was because I really just tried to push through. And and I wasn't listening to my body, and I wasn't listening to my intuition.
Great stuff. Spencer O'Brien, really appreciate you joining us. We wish you the best of success and happiness and good things happening for your body.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Appreciate it, Spencer. Take care. Spencer O'Brien, professional snowboarder from Canada. What a story, Dr. Cole.
Yeah, she's truly an inspiration, really.
Wow, and we haven't covered the RA before.
That was great.
So
she was wonderful.
Yeah, the rheumatoid arthritis and also severe anemia. Think about being on the top of a mountain,
Can you
right?
imagine? Yeah,
I mean,
you're dealing at altitude all the time and you're anemic, and what you went through to get your body to adapt to that is no small task.
Wow. All right, great stuff. And when we come back, we're going to visit with Christian Bezenar, talking about biologic surgery. So stay with us. Steve Kashul, Dr. Brian Cole at Sports Medicine Weekly, only on
670 The Score.